Welcome back to Secret Weapons, and today we're taking a look at Archetype Tom Morello by Neural DSP. Okay, I can admit that intro song kind of got out of hand at the end there. I blame the amount of fun that this plugin is, and I think that if you don't want to watch the entire however many hours this video ends up being, and you just want a quick synopsis of what I think of Archetype Tom Morello, it's that this is a goddamn fun plugin. It is ridiculous. And when I talk about fun in this plugin, I really do mean that in a very visceral sense. This is a plugin that is flexible and creative in incredibly bizarre ways. There are no drive pedals in this plugin. All your gain is coming from volume from EQ pedals and the amp itself. And yet I am having the same amount of fun playing my Bunting Melody Queen, that like Telly style offset, as I am playing that Strandberd Plini signature or the Castedosa Baritone. These are three aggressively different guitars for different purposes, in different genres, and yet they all meld into this plugin really well. For my money, this rivals Archetype Rabia as Neural's most ambitious plugin so far. Tom Morello is one of those players who, it doesn't really matter how near or far you are from guitar culture in general, his playing is something that you can recognize. His impact is something that you have felt or seen in the industry in a way that you recognize it, as opposed to something that you just never quite knew where that sound came from, that kind of thing. The sounds that he brought forth in bands like Rage and Audioslave are the kind of things that were foundational to so many people. They were so many guitar players' inroad to effects-driven playing. What I think is so fascinating about Morello is that it's not just that he was foundational to effect-driven guitar in modern rock and alternative genres, but that he did it in a way that was so far afield from what anybody else was doing. His manual usage of the effects whilst playing is an instrument unto itself. It's like watching somebody play like the kind of bass notes on an organ alongside their, like, you know, 2 or 3 organs above that, but applied to guitar. There is such a specific and interesting kind of marriage of activating, deactivating, and changing parameters on the effects while also playing guitar. And his rig is one of those things that every piece of it is necessary to replicate his sound. You can't really parse out individual pieces of it and still hope to do the same thing. Enter Archetype Morello, like I said, part-for-part recreation of the kind of most important pieces of that guitar rig. The inclusion of a meticulously modeled version of his amplifier, which sounds so good and very weird in a lot of ways, but in a way that is so deeply useful. Great cabinets to go with them, of course, but also the effects choices in this are the strangest and most unique for any of Neural's plugins so far. There's no drive pedals in this. There are unique and interesting implementations of EQ, of multi-stage delays, of obviously the wah, the whammy pedal, and the dive bomb, like things that have never been in a Neural plugin before, made so well for this one. It's fascinating and really fun to dig into. But in all honesty, I don't think we can talk anymore in this section. I think we have to just go to our sound samples because, one, Morello is such an icon that talking about his influences, he's preaching to any choir anywhere on the planet. You know Morello. If you're watching this video, you know Rage, you know Audioslave, you know his playing. So really the question is, not only does this rig do what he can do, but also for somebody like me who plays nothing like Morello or who uses nothing like the sounds from Audioslave and Rage Against the Machine, where are my applications? Where are my use cases for these fascinating, flexible, and unique tools? But one final note before we get into our sound samples, and this also counts as a piece of advice if you do pick up this plugin, set up a MIDI controller and an expression pedal for this plugin. Seriously, I highly recommend it. For the intro video and for all my sound samples, I'm using my Morningstar MC6 Pro and my Dunlop Mini Expression Volume pedal. USB straight into my computer. It's an incredibly easy, lightweight, it's not even being powered. I'm literally getting bus power from my computer, but I have this set up in such a way that I can turn off and activate different stomp boxes in the rig. I can channel switch between my clean and dirty amplifiers, and this expression pedal right here is just running into this MIDI controller, and then in the DAW or in the plugin is controlling the sweep of the dive bomb, the whammy, and the wah pedal. Configuring all this is shockingly easy. I'm going to include a link to Morningstar's tutorial on setting up a Neural DSP plugin with a MIDI controller, and pretty much all the same kind of core principles of this setup apply to your controller as well, hopefully. Let's get into our sound samples. As we're getting into our sound samples, let's go ahead and talk through kind of how we're set up to record this section of the video. I am playing my Bunting Melody Queen Model T with a Wolf Tone Rabid Bitch in the bridge, a Mojo Goldfoil in the neck, Descendant Vibrato Mastery Bridge. It sounds like this. And then in terms of capturing these sound samples, the way we have things set up right now is my guitar is running into the High-Z input on my Apollo Twin recording interface. The Tom Morello plugin is running as a standalone plugin because I find that I get better immediacy and no latency when I run it as a standalone, but I always get a little bit inside of a DAW. So the way we compensate for that, for the purposes of this, is I record with the guitar going into the standalone plugin, and then the outputs of that plugin, as you can see here, are going to be outputs virtual 3 and 4, which are then input channels on my DAW. So we're recording into Universal Audio's Luna in a stereo pair. So there's no kind of reamping or trickery happening after the fact in this version of signal flow. What you're hearing right now is exactly what is being captured as I record. And that the reason for that is twofold. One, it's for transparency in terms of how the plugin sounds. And two, it's so that when I make changes to the plugin itself, all of those changes are represented and captured in, versus kind of messing with the plugin and not saving all of those changes as you record, kind of like in real time within your DAW itself. And before we get into the specifics of Archetype Tom Morello as a plugin, let's talk about the Neural DSP plugin environment in general, because there are a lot of kind of like globally true things about their plugin line, features that are available in almost every plugin that I think are important to know. If you have not played one of their plugins before, or if you have, but you've never really dug deeper than just some of the kind of like artist presets that are available in those plugins. So let's talk through kind of the trappings of a Neural DSP plugin. If you're familiar with these, there are time codes down below to skip over to the kind of Tom Morello specific content. So in basically all of Neural's plugins, you will see kind of a very similar format. Along the top, at the very top, you have a series of icons representing different stages of your signal flow. For the Morello, it's going to be your dive bomb, the amp, your mono effects. No. For the Tom Morello, it's going to be your dive bomb, your amp, your kind of like wah and whammy, your stomp boxes, your speakers, your global EQ, and your stereo wet effects at the end of the chain. Below that, you have your input, gate, transpose, input modes, doubler, your preset controls, and your output. And then below that is going to be your GUI. It's going to be representative of kind of all of the actual pieces of the puzzle as you walk through your plugin. Represented by, like I said, it's GUI. It's very, very kind of like true to form, looks great, looks accurate, all that stuff. And then down at the bottom, you have your settings, your MIDI, your tuner, your metronome, and your tap tempo. The bottom section is pretty self-explanatory. We'll get into it in a little bit. The top section, these icons are also very self-explanatory. But let's talk through some of the kind of benefits of this second row really quick. This area is great because you've got things like your input gain. If you're playing a guitar that is kind of quieter than you'd like, or maybe you're recording into an interface that doesn't have its own kind of dedicated gain control or not enough gain control, you can adjust your input gain with that. You can set your gate. I'm playing a single coil guitar into an emulation of an amp that runs pretty hot, and so something like that gate is very useful. Let's go ahead and jump back over to that high gain channel really quick. That gate is really helpful because that's a lot of noise right there. These pickups are not noise canceling. My studio has kind of noisy power kind of like as a baseline for when I'm recording, which is unfortunate. So a great way to get rid of that is a really good responsive and natural sounding noise gate, which Neural has. And pro tip, for any of these settings, if you ever kind of find yourself like super out of whack and you don't know kind of like how to get back to what square one was supposed to be, double tapping any of these will reset you back to factory default, which is incredibly helpful. From there, we get over to our transposition, which I talked about a bunch and we really dove into on my last Neural DSP plugin video, the Mesa Boogie C+ Mark II video that I did. I'm a big fan of this transposition control because it works incredibly well, it tracks well, and it sounds very organic. So again, we have, let's go back to that crunchier rhythm tone. That transposition control, let's drop it down a fifth, make this guitar a baritone. Next up on our list of kind of like globally available things, this is one of those things that I don't know if it's in every single Neural plugin yet, but if I recall correctly, the team has talked about wanting to bring it to every single one, and that is the doubler. And again, this is one of those things that I think is incredibly high value to have in a plugin like this, which is just instant, great sounding double tracking. So again, we've got that rhythm guitar tone. I love that it is adjustable from 3 milliseconds for just a tiny bit of spread. All the way out to 20 milliseconds for just like crazy wide. It's really cool. Yeah, I'm a huge fan of both that transposition and that doubler. We covered this in my last video, but we're going to touch on it again, which is taking those two things, mixing them together, and creating just like crazy wide. And again, let's turn that off, take that transposition back, go over to our clean channel. This is what this like, kind of like clean Tele style guitar can sound like. But with like the high gain on this thing, that really cool, super crunchy. Transpose that down a fifth. Throw that doubler on it. Really cool, very monstrous sounding, big fan. And of course you have input modes, stereo or mono. The beauty there being you can do things like run your full stereo pedal board into this if you wanted to, or run a something like a stereo amplifier, or if you have a guitar that has kind of dual outputs like some of the old Rickenbackers or some of the new stuff coming out of Ernie Ball, you can actually make use of kind of parallel pickup configuration stuff in very interesting and creative sound designy ways, which I think is really cool. Of course, at the other end over here, you have your output control, which does what you think it does, up and down 24 decibels. Same thing with your input, up and down 24 decibels, you know, really blow your guitar out. And then double tap to fix it. So yeah, that is kind of the global information on these neural plugins. And a brief overview of this bottom corner right here. You have your settings, which is basically your audio input and output devices, your input and output configurations, your sample rate, which is incredibly helpful depending on how strong your system is and the ability to kind of like optimize for as little latency as possible. And over here, we have our MIDI input stuff. And we obviously touched on our MIDI stuff previously. You have your MIDI list, as we've talked about. This is basically just how I have everything set up to be able to kind of have my Morningstar and my expression pedal routed correctly. You can pause the video if you want to look at all that. We have our tuner and a metronome. Yep, you can hear a metronome. Oh, and one of my favorite things is you can pan it, because I'm somebody who wants my metronome off to the side at all times. So let's talk about what makes Archetype Tom Morello itself such a compelling and interesting plugin that kind of probably brings something to everybody's workflow that didn't previously exist, myself included, and even the fact that I have like half of their plugins already. This one stands out as something doing something really far afield from a lot of the neural DSP plugins in a really compelling way. We're going to start simple and kind of work our way out from there. I want to start off with our amplifier, and specifically from my preset, A Clean Slate. And I like this because when I'm dialing up sounds for like that intro video, I almost always start at this place right here, this sound. And so let's start by taking a look. So we will kind of build complexity as we go, but I really want to start by just taking a look at the amplifier itself, kind of the centerpiece of the plugin, this kind of like old Marshall amp, and its accompanying cabinet, and then we will start working through our kind of like the really esoteric side of this thing, the effects themselves. Tom is such a kind of like famously effect-driven person, guitar player, but his core tone, as with everybody, is what you live and die on. Bad guitar tone made weird is still bad guitar tone. And the amplifier here is phenomenal. Almost all the sounds that I kind of have spun up for this plugin, all the stuff that I used on the intro of this video, was all from this kind of A Clean Slate kind of starting point for me. And it's just because I like a good, clean, warm, kind of edge of breakup-y kind of sound that I can then use as my jumping off point. So we are starting up on the normal channel with the presence up, volume up, and a little bit of reverb on the master. And this is kind of my, what I consider to be my starting baseline tone on this thing. And I love this because it can be crunchy if you dig into it. But you can kick on all of your crazy wet effects and everything. With that phaser in there. Let's take everything out, including that reverb. There we go. We are down to just that little splash of amp reverb now. Okay, and let's dig into it. Let's start with this kind of master control over here. Obviously, you have your master volume, which is going to do exactly what you think it does. What's really nice is because that master is post gain, you could actually MIDI map your expression pedal to that for volume swells in this thing, which is kind of a cool little like added piece of the puzzle. The beauty of these plugins is like that MIDI customization is so robust and everything. This amp reverb right here sounds great. So no amp verb. that stereo reverb at the end can get it can get kind of tight and focused, but the nature of it being this big stereo reverb keeps it pretty washy, even at its kind of more restrained places. This one obviously can get very washy as well. But I do love that it, as just kind of like a little splash, can do a lot for that rhythm channel. That bringing a little bit of that amp verb. Really, really helpful. It's very subtle. It's not overstated, but like. And then some of that reverb brought back in. Yeah, it's a great sounding reverb. It's really great. Presence control is subtle in all the ways that you need it to be. Especially those kind of cleaner sounds. Literally min-maxing that presence control can do a lot to kind of create really great mellow warmth. Or like a nice, like shiny sparkle. How do you not bring back the delay and the reverb for this? Yeah, that presence control is something really special, and I like that quite a bit. So let's take a look at this normal channel really quick. This is going to be obviously your lower gain channel than that boost channel that gets really hairy and crazy. But I find it fascinating. I don't know how true to form. I'm assuming this is like a very accurate recreation of Tom's amplifier. And if that's the case, I am jealous of this amplifier because too many things sound too good at maximums in a way that I find to be very, very kind of bizarre. So like. You've got a great kind of like alt knobs at noon thing right there. That volume can clean up really, really well. And then you can always just increase that output to make up for that. Or it on its own can get like pretty crunchy in a cool way. But what's a really kind of bizarre thing here is cranking that volume up completely minimizing bass and treble. I don't know why this sound is awesome, but I love it. Let's max that volume. You get this really weird mid-rangey honky. It's definitely not an all-use thing, but for some reason, I really like. It's a great kind of like knobs at zero sound for some reason. Let's focus on this from the clean perspective for now, though. We've got some great controls in here. Some great warm stuff. You can take that presence all the way out and get some really cool, some really great sounds out of it. Yeah, it's great. And let's jump over to this boost channel. This is where a lot of the gain range in this thing exists. You've got some great cleans on that normal channel, but all of your like really raucous and crazy high gain stuff is going to happen on this side. And it's interesting that this plugin doesn't have any kind of drive stomp boxes in it. You've got a bunch of effects, but none of them are like an overdrive, like a Timmy or an 808 or anything else like that. Until you get into this and you realize why. You've got your master volume over here. You've got your boost channel, you've got your 3-band EQ, your volume, and your gain, and there's a lot of gain on tap here. Crazy thing is there is still room for like some great nuance on this side. Let's roll the bass back a little bit and let that kind of like treble and presence kind of sit out in front on this kind of boost channel. There's a very woody tone to that I think is really cool. Let's bring that low end back in. I think that the bass being maxed out on the boost channel really opens it up in a really nice way. And the really great thing about this plugin and the kind of neural plugins in general, again, not to skip ahead, is the multi-stage EQing you can do to kind of Get that sound right there. And then skip ahead, carve some of the mud out of those lows. Yeah, it's really, really cool. Bring our volume down, bring this volume down a little bit as well. You can get that kind of like, I'm gonna go get back to that high gain sound. You can get that like properly mid scoop thing like we got going on right now. A little too metal for my taste, but that's fine. Or you can do what's great to do, which is, you know, crank that mid control. Yeah, I love how kind of just like classically chunky that amp profile is. It's really great. I could play a lot of punk on that and be very, very happy. Okay, let's re-pull up our clean slate. Let's jump now over to our cabinets really quick and talk through this side of things. And then we will get into the kind of like fun esoteric nonsense of this plugin. This is going to be your cabinet control, and it's great. You've got your 2 different microphone options, a bunch of mics you can select from, or the ability to kind of load your own custom IRs if you want. I love this because it's essentially a discrete IR system disguised as not like the IR system that makes me want to like gouge my eyes out. I hate the menu diving of selecting IRs. This actually instead brings up a bunch of hundreds of IRs discreetly via your position, distance, and what microphone you have chosen. So you can kind of set very precise things like your position by moving that position control itself. Same thing with your distance, or you can actually grab the microphone and pull it farther away or farther from the center in a very kind of like cool, handy way. You've got a bunch of microphones. Let's solo up the left side mic only for a second. I love the very nuanced ability to kind of just give it a little bit of distance. And it gives you, and it really does give you a very accurate sense of that stuff. You've got, you know, position right on that cone, way off to the side. And conversely, that distance and the ability to get it just right, just where you want it to be. You have your mic levels in case you want to balance them out. You can also like hard pan your 2 mics away from each other for a different version of that stereo spread than using the actual doubler. I tend to not be crazy about that version of things, but it is a thing that a lot of people find a lot of use in. And then you, of course, also have a room level control, which is also, like I said, incredibly helpful to have. being able to fine tune like even those like tiny nuances is really great. And then of course you've got a bunch of mic options. You've got your Ribbon 121. The 421, which is a classic. For me, I like to live in that 57 121 world. I think it's a really great place to be. Especially on that clean channel. You get all that low end from the 121, and then like an off-axis 57 for a little bit of bite, but enough for room tone. So let's jump into the effects side of the Archetype Tom Morello, starting things off with Dive Bomb. Now, Dive Bomb is going to be a kind of like envelope triggered pitch shifter that can either kind of come up to meet your signal or fall down from your signal. Like I said, I have my Morningstar down below, activating and deactivating, as well as controlling the pedal itself, which controls the speed at which it reacts to your kind of like input playing. So basically at the heel point of this thing, there's an immediacy to the effect that basically makes it so you can't even hear it. And as you kind of sweep that up to the point where it is like so comically long. For me, where the beauty of this lies is a nice, subtle, low heel position, but for chords. Because I'm not somebody who really loves and trades in like really wacky guitar sounds traditionally, but that is really great. Especially when you wash it out. I mean, this is the thing. It's Tom Morello's whole thing was creative effects stacking. And for me, this thing is just a great opportunity to do the same thing, but to the ends of giant ambience as opposed to funk, rock, hip hop fusions. Even individual notes start to sound a little too that for me, but I love that subtle movement at the front of that is such an amazing way to introduce a chord in an ambient context. And this is why having the expression pedal here is so useful. Being able to maybe go like those little adjustments to movement can be really, really compelling in interesting ways. Let's take that delay and reverb back out. And jump to the down. So now you are dropping from from your note to an octave below it. Again, throw a phaser, delay, and reverb on that. There's something real compelling about just having that absolute hair of the original. That's really cool. I love that. So yeah, that is, at least from my perspective, Dive Bomb. Let's get out of Dive Bomb. Let's jump over to Whammy and our Wah. And I love the whammy on this thing. It is the most fun thing. One of my favorite kind of like little things about it is how good of a chorus it is. Not even in detune mode, but just blend mode at 0. It's very flangey in a way that I really love. And of course, this thing has access to from 2 octaves below to 2 octaves above. So you can go like, you know, straight into the depths if you want. All the way up to above. Or go ahead and span a 4 octave range just for fun. For me, I'm a huge fan of course, starting at unity and having a fifth. It's just nice. It's just a nice little, you know, simple. It is the whammy. It's the thing. And it's also just the best freaking chorus. Especially when you mean it to be. I love the flanging thing on the other side, but it's also just, I mean, stereo delay, stereo reverb, this chorus, Be Still My Soul. And imagine if you didn't have that whammy right there. I love it. It's so great. On the other side, I do really like the ability to also do that same transposition thing, having access on the expression controller for that baritone. gives you access to a lot of really chaotic, wonderful stuff. Yeah, what's not to love? It's a whammy. It's the best. And let's take a brief look at our wah pedal because we ought to, despite the fact that I am somebody with not a lot of love, appreciation, or experience with wah. Again, this is where the expression pedal control comes in handy and the ability to kind of recall presets, because for me, the kind of classic doesn't hold a lot of allure to me, but that cocked wah sound, that kind of like find the sweet spot and leave it there or let it slowly move past it is really useful. So like stereo delay and reverb. I have everything mapped the same, as you can tell every time I'm moving the expression pedal, everything moves in tandem. If I was going to use the wah on a specific like use case here, I would do what you can totally do here, which is map your expression pedal to min-max exactly where you want it to in the wah. Like I don't necessarily think that I need the all the way heel down position. It's a little too resonant for kind of like how I would use it. I also don't know that I would need like the full toe. It is kind of cool as like as a lo-fi sound. Actually, as we talk about that, let's dial back our treble hair. Let's dial back that presence quite a bit. And suddenly, I think, actually, let's take that presence completely out now. And suddenly, I think I might have a lot more appreciation for the toe down wah. Yep, I take it all back. Great lo-fi sounds right there. Wah, it's now my favorite effect. Congratulations, wah. But yeah, the fact that you could kind of like map your like min-max settings to kind of like a preset by preset basis in here, really, really helpful. Yeah, it's really killer. These kind of expression pedal driven aspects of this thing are really astonishingly well implemented. They sound great, and they give you just so many useful sounds. It's really, really something special. So let's take a quick look at some of the more traditional stomp box options in the Archetype Tom Morello. As you can see on this page, you've got a simple 3-knob delay, an EQ, and a phaser. That phaser is very clearly based on the MXR Phase 90. The delay is, it kind of looks modeled after something like a carbon copy, again, MXR, but it has a very kind of like pristine digital quality to it. I'm not 100% sure where it's kind of based in, but what I do know is it's really well tuned. So let's start with that delay and kind of work our way through from there. So. So mix doesn't go full wet here, but it does go above unity. And you can, of course, get runaway oscillations. But what I dig about it is it functions really well as kind of like a very like quick slapback kind of delay for just like thickening up guitar parts. It can be really kind of percussive, like a very effective kind of like rhythmic, you know. Or you can have it kind of like low mix and really get a great kind of, like I said, kind of like almost like what I would call like a thickening agent. So very frequently when I'm using kind of big delay and reverb sounds, you will hear kind of those like washy stereo delay lines. And they kind of bounce back and forth on the far left and right. What I love is having access to a mono delay as well like this, where you can just kind of add a little bit of, let's take that back out, and you can kind of hear how kind of like solo my guitar in the center feels. Sometimes you want that kind of cleanliness, but if you're doing like tremolo picking stuff, it can be nice to throw in that mono delay. It's also just really great as kind of a way to further kind of blur those really clean stereo delay trails. It's like snappy and percussive, but also reacts really well to your playing dynamics. So you can do that kind of very traditional. Or you can get a really great using kind of some bends and some tremolo action on the guitar itself to impart some added modulation to those trails. It's very like a blank canvas delay in a really cool way, which also means it reacts really well to your amp's gain as well. So like you've got, you know, yeah, it's a great little delay. Very clean, very effective. Okay, let's take a look at this EQ right here. This is a really kind of like high value piece of the puzzle because I think that the the bands on this are fairly resonant to my ear, like kind of one of those a little goes a long way kind of EQs. You can use it for pretty dramatic cleanup. You can use it for overall level adjustments. That first slider is going to be the level that the whole EQ kind of pushes through. And then, yeah, then you can just kind of use it to really tailor your EQ in that way that we talked about in the last neural video of the inclusion of multi-stage equalizing is really, really helpful in my opinion. Having access to your amp's kind of like primary EQ, a post-amp pre-cabinet pedal-based EQ, and then a post-amplifier kind of master EQ, so to speak. And I find this one to be fairly kind of refined in the way that it responds to things. And I find this one to be pretty aggressive, like very resonant, a little goes a long way kind of thing. So let's give it a listen here. You can kind of like sweeten stuff up or really kind of like blow the walls out of things. Let's jump back to our clean amp. Obviously, you can do your kind of initial low-end cleanup on this. Having that level control is great for being able to offset the volume that you get from cutting frequencies, considering how aggressively this EQ pedal cuts them. Tiny little like mid scoops can do a lot to really like gentle up a guitar part. Add a little bit of sparkle if you want. Or on the other side of the spectrum, with that heavier amp, you can do kind of a very like classically mid scoopy sound on this thing in a way that's very modern metal, so to speak. And of course, always nice to be able to just level everything back out. And it's worth noting that because you have this level control over here, kind of controlling the overall output of the pedal, and because these frequency bands are so aggressive, this phaser this equalizer, excuse me, kind of serves as your de facto overdrive pedal in this context. Like increase level, kind of create like a slightly mid forward, almost kind of like proto tube screamer style, kind of just like classic mid boost, and you've got now, obviously, these effects are all considered to be, I think, technically, quote unquote, in the effects loop of the amplifier. So adjustments to this equalizer are not going to hit the front of your amp. So there is no kind of like proper overdrive, like standalone pedal in here. But this equalizer versus like that master EQ down the chain really is a more formidable piece of the puzzle in terms of simulating that concept of an additional like gain stage. It's kind of funny. It almost even works as in some of my kind of like playing around with this plugin and everything. It kind of almost works as an always on, just like slight boost sweetener. even with just like a half a dB boost, I just kind of like leaving it there. And then it's a great spot for having that extra boost and then kind of carving out little small unwanted frequencies. Yeah, it's a great little EQ pedal. We're gonna leave it on. And then of course you have that classic of all sounds, the phaser. It's that classic MXR phase sound. Gets really cool, soupy, and slow at low speeds. I'm a big fan of those like really aggressively slow phaser speeds. Also really useful for throwing that delay into, for a little bit of added movement on that delay. So those are the kind of three core stomp boxes in this thing. Let's go ahead, take out that EQ, take a quick look at this kind of master EQ right here. Like I said, I consider this one to be more of a finisher. You've got different frequency bands that you're adjusting over here, but it's a great way to kind of like pull out some unwanted hiss in your signal. Let's bring up our amp's output a little bit for this. Reset all these to noon. And just kind of do some experimenting. I said, this is the EQ that I call the kind of intentionally subtle EQ to balance out that really aggressive EQ in the stomp box section. I'm a big fan of this as both, like I said, like kind of like fine tuning some stuff, but also if you're on that higher gain amp channel and you have that bass like totally maxed out, a 65 shelf can be very handy. Yeah, it's when you're mixing guitars generally, it's amazing how far fewer frequencies you actually want on an electric guitar on a record than you do when you're just like sitting in your room by yourself, kind of dialing up the biggest guitar tone possible. And having access to an EQ like this that will basically carve out the spaces that in a mix would otherwise be reserved for your keyboard player, your bass player, your vocalist, your cymbals, that kind of thing. This is a great added layer of kind of mastering finish, but done in a very subtle way that I think is a great counterbalance to some of the more aggressive choices being made in this pedal, which I really, really like. So let's take a look at the stereo delay and reverb at the end of this thing here. We have here our stereo delay and our stereo reverb. This delay is great because it does all of the like quality of life stuff that the other one doesn't. The other one is a great mono center channel, kind of like creative focused guitar kind of accent piece. This delay, it can do the single engine mono delay thing, where you have a very similar kind of sound, but with high pass and low pass controls, which is really, really handy. But the big selling point on this one is access to this stereo ping pong delay. Let's open it wide up. So you've got that kind of like very true to form your sound recreated of a digital delay. But with the ability to do these kind of like roll-offs for like a more subtle analog sound. Or conversely, rolling off some of those lows for a more kind of like tape experience. And of course, the ability to just kind of like fine tune between the two, hit that second delay line. Love a good stereo delay. You have subdivisions on both sides, so you've got your everything from kind of a minimum delay line all the way out to maximum. Max on this is going to be 1100 milliseconds. And this, of course, will follow your tap tempo. The great thing about this is you have access to some of those classic kind of sounds, the like dotted eighth on one side, quarter note on the other. you also have access to a bunch of other stuff. Like, I really like that you can kind of take them. This is one of my favorite little tricks, is putting them both at the same subdivision, so you get back to a mono sounding delay. Jump over to time, turn sync off, and make just a slight incremental adjustment to one of them. And so now, instead of having properly kind of like ping-ponging delays, now you have access to like a slightly chorused out Haas affected delay. Again, if you don't want that rhythmic thing, but you do want some space in between, this is my pro tip for that move, which is really great with the reverb. So here's where you actually get your full wet. And there's actually a cool thing that you can do with this as well, which is full wet, minimum delay time, aggressively low passed, somewhat high passed, and now you have a somewhat lo-fi sounding guitar, very narrow frequency band to work with. And again, you can use that desync. If you don't want to use the doubler in the traditional sense, you can always turn that doubler on and get that. But you can also take this sound, turn that sync off, jump over to milliseconds, and just add, there we go, 78 milliseconds to one side. You know what we're gonna do too? Let's take that whammy, bring that back in. See, now we're just getting into some stuff. Let's grab the detune, that really amazing chorus sound. Jump back over to our stereo delay. Bring back that kind of like stereo widened lo-fi sound. And this is why you map everything to a foot controller. Add that phaser in as well. But let's not forget, it is also still just a really, really good delay pedal. I really love when you like aggressively low pass it, how tapey it gets. Yeah, it's a great little delay. It's very rhythmic. It has all of that kind of like wide ambient space when you want it, especially at those like really slow delay times. And let's take a look at this reverb. Neural is great at pristine sounding, big, kind of like hall verbs. And this is no exception. This is a great sounding, very... Let's kind of open it all the way up. No pre-delay, just big reverb. You can also get endless. We'll stop here for a second so I can say one thing, which is I really like how little of a bounce there is on that pre-delay. I find that a lot of pre-delays can feel like, especially when you get it to a maxed out setting like this, that you get kind of like a initial note and then the attack of your note and then the bounce of the reverb coming in. That bounce, it's almost imperceptible when you're actually playing, which I think is really cool. I wonder if it's reactive. One thing I will say about this pre-delay is all pre-delay, when you max it out, is going to have a certain bounce that I find to be a little bit disconcerting in a lot of contexts. That kind of your guitar's initial attack and then the reverb kind of like dropping in. I think that the way that the kind of like start of that reverb trail is handled in pre-delay is actually really smooth and gentle in a way that I really like, where you've got and of course you can dial up some really kind of like subtle reverb sounds as well. They don't all have to be soundscapey. I really love like low mix, medium decay, but a lot of the like highs cut out for like kind of like heavier guitar tones. This tends to be one of my favorite tricks. Kind of like you've got your kind of like angrier guitar tone. It's subtle. It's like it's one of those things that you miss it when it's gone, but it doesn't wash out your signal.